The contents of this program may not necessarily represent the views of Ummah Channel.
اچھا، سب سے پہلے مجھے بتائیے کہ تھیلیسیمیا آپ کی فیملی میں کس کو ہے؟
میرے بیٹے یہ جو بیٹی ہے میری، اس کو ہے 5-6 سال کی بیٹی ہے، اس کو ہے تھیلیسیمیا۔
تو جب پہلے آپ کو تھیلیسیمیا کے بارے میں پتہ چلا تو پریشانی ہوئی؟
ہاں، اس وقت تو بہت ہارڈ تھا، لیکن اب یوز تو ہو گئی 6 سال سے نا۔ جب میں نے پریگنینسی میں ٹیسٹ کیا نا امینیم سینٹنس، تو تب پتہ چلا تھا، تب پتہ چل گیا تھا۔ لیکن اس وقت یہ 4 مہینے 15 دن کی ہو چکی نا، تو اسلام 4 مہینے کے بعد ابورشن کی اجازت نہیں دیتی، تو اس وجہ سے میں نے ابورشن نہیں کیا۔
تو اب کیسی زندگی گزری ہے؟ مشکل کام ہے؟
بہت زیادہ مشکل کام ہے، جیسے چھوٹا 1 دن کے بچہ ہوتے ہیں نا، اس طرح مشکل ہے اس کی تھیلیسیمیا کے پیشنٹ کا خیال رکھنا، بہت مشکل ہے۔
تو کیسے سپورٹ مل رہی ہے NHS کی طرف سے یا
اس کی طرف سے تو بہت زیادہ سپورٹ ملتے ہیں، ہم بہت خوش ہیں، NHS سے بھی بہت خوش ہیں، آرگنائزیشن سے بھی بہت زیادہ خوش ہیں۔ جو ریسپیکٹ نہیں کرتے اس سے بھی زیادہ مل رہا ہے، شکر اللہ کا۔
کیا پیغام دینا چاہتے ہیں جو بہن بھائی جن کو پتہ بھی نہیں تھیلیسیمیا؟
جس کو پتہ نہیں ہے نا، تو اس کو میں یہ پیغام دینا چاہتی ہوں نا کہ جس شادی کرنا ہے، بیٹا ہے بیٹی ہے، تو اس میں کوئی شرم کی بات نہیں ہے۔ سب سے پہلے جو ہے نا بلڈ ٹیسٹ، سمپل بلڈ ٹیسٹ ہے، وہ پلیز اللہ کے لیے کروائیں، کیونکہ اس وقت تو ہم کہتے نہیں، ہمیں شرم فیل ہو رہا ہے کہ ہم کسی سے بیٹی مانگے تو اس سے کیسے کہیں گے کہ بیٹی کے بلڈ ٹیسٹ کراؤ۔ اگر آپ پہلے یہ بات نہیں کہہ سکتے تو آگے زندگی آپ کیسے گزارو گے اس کے ساتھ؟
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Nigat Khan from Sheffield Sickle Cell and Thalassemia Project, and I work as a community development worker.
So as a community development worker, what do you think, how big is the issue of thalassemia in our community?
I think it's a big issue. The biggest thing is that there's still a lack of awareness around thalassemia itself. So I think there definitely needs to be a lot more work done to raise awareness in terms of what it is, because as you probably know, there are the trait carriers is they have no symptoms, and because it's got no symptoms, and that's a worry, because anybody in this audience or anybody outside could be a carrier without even not knowing. And that's the biggest problem, because the only way you can actually find out is actually by having a blood test. So if you can just imagine if, and we are as a, especially Pakistani community is one of the at-risk communities. So if there is a few carriers in the family, and I know things are changing now, we're not always marrying within families, people do marry out of family, but this isn't a condition that is just within families. You can marry out of the family and it could still be in that particular family. So it's about knowing who that person is, who you're marrying. The only best way I can say is if you have all your family tested, you'd know beforehand if there's carriers, so then you can
Jazakallah. You got 2 people around you. Do you want to introduce them, who they are and what's their background?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Arfan Hussain and I'm 24. I'm a thalassemia patient.
You are thalassemia major.
Patient.
So when you had thalassemia, what was the reaction of families, and do you remember anything?
To be honest, no, I don't, because I've had it since I was a little baby, so I can't remember much.
How are you coping it now?
Alhamdulillah, it's going well. Got a pole with it anyway, so it's taken along. So
Encouragement.
yeah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu
What's your
alaikum.
name?
Muhammad.
Muhammad. And what's your background? Are you thalassemic or do you have family?
Is my son thalassemia major.
So your son is thalassemia major. How old is he?
He's 14 years old now.
14 years old. When did you find out 14 years ago when he was born and you've been told that he is thalassemia patient? What was your reaction?
Devastated. Very unhappy. But now when we come to those meetings and the foundations from Mrs. Khan, so we gather together then.
Okay, Jazakallah.
So thank you for
effect that thalassemia may have on fertility. Right, first of all, thalassemia does not cause infertility, but it can. But it can cause infertility. And I think the main message to get across today is that preventative measures are the most important way forward, because fertility treatments aren't actually terribly good. But preventative measures can mean that patients with thalassemia never need to come and see somebody like me. So why does thalassemia cause a problem? It's all due to the risk of iron overload on the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is a very small gland towards the front of the brain, which is extremely important for the control of all sorts of hormonal production throughout the body. And it's also particularly important because the pituitary gland it's like the powerhouse, if you like, for controlling how the ovaries and the testes work. So the pituitary gland is particularly sensitive to iron overload. And once it's overloaded with iron, it cannot function. And it can't be cured. You can't get rid of iron from the pituitary. Once it's destroyed, it's destroyed. And the pituitary gland is very important because it helps control the thyroid function, and thyroid is a hormone that helps control metabolism. It produces growth hormone, which, as you know, is very important for growth up until adulthood and then for a sense of well-being in adulthood. It's also important for steroid production, which is extremely important for the normal functioning of many parts of health. And it's also important because it controls the function of the ovary and the testes. So in men, what happens is that the pituitary gland secretes two hormones called FSH and LH, and they act on the testes, and they encourage the testes to produce both sperm and to produce the male hormone testosterone. The situation is quite similar in the female. Again, the pituitary gland produces two hormones, FSH and LH, and these act on the ovaries to encourage the ovaries to produce hormones, predominantly estrogen hormone, and also to grow and release eggs. So again, just to stress, the thing that's really important is with the use of good chelating agents, we prevent any damage to the pituitary gland. So this process of this stimulation of the testes and the ovaries will work normally. But what happens when the pituitary gland becomes overloaded? Well, in the female, if the pituitary gland's overloaded, it just stops working. And what happens is there is no production of FSH or LH from that gland, so there's no driver to the ovary. And as a result of that, the woman doesn't produce any estrogen hormone and she doesn't release any eggs. What happens in women when that happens, their periods will stop. In men, the situation is quite similar. So again, if the pituitary doesn't produce FSH and LH, there's no drive to the testis, and then there isn't any production of sperm, and there may also not be any production of testosterone. So what's the treatment for patients who've actually had failure of the pituitary? Really important thing is to replace all of the pituitary all the hormones that the pituitary would normally drive. So patients will have to take steroid drugs, they'll have to take tablets of thyroxine, and also to have growth hormone. Growth hormone is particularly important in children, obviously, so they can acquire a good final height. As an adult, growth hormone does encourage quite a sense of well-being, so some patients would actually want to continue on growth hormone even as an adult, although that's not always available. And then we also need to replace the sex hormones, because even if we forget about fertility, it is really very, very important for women to have estrogen hormone in their body and for men to have testosterone. So why do we replace sex hormones? Well, it's absolutely essential that we do, and the main reason is the protection of the bones, because if patients have low levels of, in women, estrogen and in men testosterone, they're at very high risk of getting osteoporosis. And even after 6 months of no estrogen or no testosterone, people will start to exhibit some thinning of the bones. So it's absolutely crucial that people take some form of replacement. As I said before, a lot of hormones give a general sense of well-being, and that's certainly the case with estrogen and testosterone. These hormones also help protect the bladder and the rest of the urogenital system, and also estrogen is very protective for the heart in women, so it's absolutely crucial that these hormones are replaced. I think there's also always a concern in women because of stories about hormone replacement in breast cancer, but certainly in young patients, the benefits of taking the replacement far outweigh any risk, so it's absolutely essential that young women who do have pituitary failure do take some form of replacement, and equally for men. And how can you replace sex hormones? In women, this is usually in tablet form, can be in patches as well, and it's very important that these hormones are used in a way that they induce periods. In men, they can have implants or gels, but actually taking hormone replacement, both in men and women, is actually very, very straightforward and very, very easy. So if we now talk about how patients can be treated if they do have pituitary failure, if they want to have a child. First of all, I'm just going to briefly talk about the treatment for men. So as you remember from the slide a few slides back, the pituitary produces these hormones of FSH and LH which drive the testes to produce testosterone and sperm. If the pituitary gland isn't working, we can replace those hormones and give injections, and that would be injections usually in men every 2 to 3 days, and then possibly daily, to encourage the testes to work. In these cases, men need to have one type of injection called Pregnal, for about 3 months, and occasionally that will induce the production of sperm on its own. So after about 3 months of treatment, with injections every couple of days, a man would have a sperm test to see if there was any sperm in the ejaculate. If there's no sperm seen, then you can actually at that point add in a second injection which has to be taken daily, and again repeat the treatment for 3 months. If sperm is seen in the ejaculate at that point, then you tell a couple to have intercourse normally at home. The difficulty with this treatment, as you can see, first of all, it takes a very long time. It takes sort of on average, it's very unusual to get good sperm production in under 6 months of treatment. And the other thing is that it doesn't cure the problem. All it does is it helps the testes to produce sperm while the man's having those injections. So it's actually it's quite difficult treatment. It goes on for a very long time. It's quite expensive. It's not always patients can't always access it within the NHS. So it is really quite difficult treatment. And as I said, it only works. The couples only have a chance of pregnancy while the man's actually taking the injections. If they did achieve a pregnancy, what you would do is you would then stop the injections, move the man back onto some form of replacement, and then if they wanted another child in the future, he would have to have injections again. Sometimes sperm can be frozen during the course of treatment with the injections, but unfortunately that sperm is often not of terribly good quality, so could only be used within a sort of an IVF type of treatment in the future. So as I said, I know it's a bit of a repetition, but it's really important to prevent the need for this. If the pituitary fails, yes, there are treatments, but actually they're not easy and they don't always work, so the prevention is absolutely key. And in women, similar situation, although the treatment is a little bit more complex. And again, because the pituitary doesn't produce any of the hormones which it normally does, what happens is that for those women, we give them daily injections, which they administer themselves, and those injections should encourage the ovary to respond to start producing estrogen hormone, but more importantly to produce eggs. In women it is much, much more difficult because we have to monitor them very closely, because obviously if you stimulate a woman and she produces 8 or 9 eggs, then that's very dangerous. We want to produce 1 or maybe 2 eggs per cycle. So during the treatment, the woman would have injections every day of this drug called Menopur, which contains a little bit of both of the hormones needed. But she would have to come in probably every 2 days or so for bloods and for scans to see how she's responding. And she may need to have treatment for several weeks. but throughout that time she's having daily injections and a visit to the hospital every 2 days. If an egg grows nicely and we see an egg developing on scan, we then give a final injection which causes the release of that egg and again tell the couple to have intercourse at home. Problem is, as I said, it is quite long, intensive, difficult treatment, and it's probably only got a success rate of about 15% per cycle. And this treatment also, because it is very expensive and it's very intensive, is also subject to NHS eligibility criteria. So it's often very difficult for patients to access it. So once again, it's all about prevention. So if the treatment doesn't work, if we give a man injections and he produces sperm but the couple don't achieve pregnancy, or with the woman we cause her to ovulate and she doesn't get pregnant, then those couples would really need to access IVF treatment. And this again is very difficult because of NHS eligibility criteria. There are very strict criteria which do change across the country. In the northwest it's bad enough, we're probably the best provided for area in England for NHS IVF, but it is still again not something that everybody can access. It's also not terribly successful. If you look at the best group of patients, that's women under 35, there's about a 1 in 3 chance of that cycle resulting in a pregnancy. And if you have to go and pay for it privately, it's very expensive. It's in the region of about £5,000 a cycle. So it is very difficult and not particularly successful treatment. So again, it's all about prevention. So as I said, the problems with fertility treatment is they're not terribly successful, and there is this eligibility NHS criteria issue, which is a major problem. Eligibility criteria mean that women usually over the age of 40 can't be treated. It is extremely unlikely that anybody would be able to access treatment to have a second child. So women have to be of normal weight, have to be non-smokers. So there are very strict criteria. And I think that one of the things that's often missed, even for couples who can come and have treatment, is that most couples actually don't want one child. Most people want more than one child. And certainly you can't access treatment to help you have a second child within the NHS. And you would have to go privately, and then again, private treatment is very expensive. So again, it's all about preventing the need for this treatment in the first place. And a lot of couples need to come for IVF anyway, for other fertility issues. But I think if you can prevent the need for it because of pituitary damage, it's hugely beneficial. Just to briefly mention screening and pregnancy, I know that somebody's going to talk to you this afternoon about this. I'm going to only mention it very briefly. And obviously screening in pregnancy or pre-pregnancy is obviously a very personal and you know, people have very different views, very different personal and ethical views and considerations about the rights and wrongs of this and whether it's something they would wish to explore or not. There are 2 routes of screening if that was something you wanted to do. There's pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, which is more acceptable to many couples, because what that does is a couple would go through an IVF treatment cycle, and then when those embryos are created, you can actually biopsy and screen the embryo to see if the embryo is affected, and then only go on to replace so-called unaffected embryos. Again, this is something that's not acceptable to everybody. To go down the route of PGD, you have to have a cycle of IVF. Even if this was something that you wanted to do, even in young women, it's only really suitable for women who have a very high egg number. If there's a low egg number, then PGD just isn't really an option. It's again subject to very strict eligibility guidelines. As I said before, you have to have a high egg number, and you're probably looking at a success rate possibly of about 1 in 4 per cycle. If you didn't get NHS funding and you went privately for PGD, it's probably, including your IVF cycle, going to be getting up towards £10,000 for a cycle, so it's extremely expensive. And then the only other option is prenatal screening, but obviously this is sort of a further ethical consideration, because this is obviously during a pregnancy. So not only does it carry the risk of miscarriage, but it's very important to make a decision about what you would wish to do should the baby be affected, and that's a decision I think it's really important to make before you consider going down this route, because there's no point exposing yourself to the risk of a miscarriage if you would continue with the pregnancy. So obviously these are all very, very difficult issues, and I think things that patients need to think about very carefully before deciding how to proceed. So thank you very much for listening, and if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you.
ڈاکٹر شاہ تھینک یو ویری مچ فار ٹاکنگ ٹو اس. سر اب بتائیے کہ تھیلاسیمیا کتنی بڑی ایشو ہے ہمارے یو کے میں؟
تھیلاسیمیا ہمارے یو کے میں بہت بڑا ایشو ہے. 25 بچے ہر سال میں پیدا ہوتے ہیں تھیلاسیمیا میجر کے ساتھ. حالانکہ کوئی بچہ نہیں پیدا ہونا چاہیے تھیلاسیمیا میجر کے ساتھ. یہ اس لیے ہوتے ہیں کیونکہ ہم شادی کرنے سے پہلے ہم ٹیسٹ نہیں کرتے کہ 2 کیریئرز کی ہم شادی نہ کریں, اور کوشش کریں کہ اس پہ نہ ہم یہ مشکلات میں آئیں. جو بچے پیدا ہوتے ہیں وہ آلموسٹ ایکسکلوسیولی مسلم پاپولیشن, پاکستانی پاپولیشن میں ہیں.
تو اس کا کیا حل ہے, کیا آپ ایڈوائز دیں گے فیملی کو پریونشن کے حوالے سے؟
پریونشن کے حوالے سے ہمارے لیے سب سے سینسبل یہ کام ہے کہ ہم شادی کرنے سے پہلے ہم ٹیسٹ کریں تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ کے لیے, اور ہم اپنا جو بچہ تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ ہے ہم ان کو نان ٹریٹ بچے کے ساتھ شادی کریں. جو ہمارا نان ٹریٹ بچہ ہے تو ٹریٹ کے ساتھ شادی کرنے میں کوئی مسئلہ نہیں ہے. جو کیریئرز ہیں وہ بالکل ٹھیک ٹھاک تندرست ہوتے ہیں, ان میں کوئی مسئلہ نہیں ہوتا. مگر 2 کیریئرز کی شادی ہونے کے ساتھ خطرہ ہوتا ہے 25% ہر پریگننسی کے ساتھ کہ بچہ تھیلاسیمیا میجر کا پیدا ہو سکتا ہے.
تو اب کیا میسج دینا چاہیں گے کمیونٹی کو کہ کیسے ہم اس پہ قابو پا سکتے ہیں؟
ہماری کمیونٹی میں سب سے بیسٹ یہ ہے کہ ہم تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ کو ہم اس کو ایک بیماری نہ سمجھیں. ہم یہ سمجھیں کہ ہمیں یہ تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ جو ہیں ان لوگوں کی شادیاں ہم نے نان ٹریٹ کے ساتھ کرنی ہیں. اس کے ساتھ ہم بالکل تھیلاسیمیا اپنی کمیونٹی میں ختم کر سکتے ہیں. سائپرس کے لوگ, سعودی عربیہ میں, مختلف ممالک میں انہوں نے تھیلاسیمیا میجر کے بچے کی پیدائش بالکل ختم کر دی ہے یہ کرنے سے. صرف ہم لوگ جو پاکستانی ہیں ہم اس کام میں کامیاب نہیں ہو رہے کیونکہ ہم تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ کو ایک بیماری سمجھتے ہیں جب وہ ایک بیماری نہیں ہے.
تو ظاہر ہے جب سعودی عرب اور سائپرس اور باقی کمیونٹی نے اس پہ قابو پا لیا تو ہمارے لیے کیا مشکلات ہیں کہ ہم اس پہ قابو نہیں پا رہے, کیا کرنا چاہیے؟
ہم لوگ بہت شرماتے ہیں. ہم تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ کو ایک بیماری سمجھتے ہیں. اس کو بیماری سمجھنے کے وقت جب ہم لوگ رشتے کرتے ہیں ہم پھر کہتے ہیں کہ نہیں یہ بیمار ہے, ہم نے اس کے ساتھ شادی نہیں کرنی. حالانکہ ٹریٹ بالکل نارمل لوگ ہوتے ہیں, ان کے ساتھ ایز لانگ ایز کہ آپ کا جو بچہ یا بیٹی ہے وہ کیریئر نہیں ہے, شادی کرنے میں کوئی مسئلہ نہیں ہے. تو تھیلاسیمیا ٹریٹ بالکل عام لوگوں کے طرح ہیں. صرف یہ ہے کہ بچے کا بلڈ ٹیسٹ کروائیں, چیک کریں کہ وہ ٹریٹ نہیں ہے, اور پھر آپ الحمدللہ کر کے تو رشتہ کریں.
میرا نام زیب ہے اور میں لیڈ سے آئی ہوں.
تو آپ کیا کرتی ہیں؟
میرا جاب جو ہے سکل سیل تھیلاسیمیا کاؤنسلر ہوں. میڈیکلی کوالیفائڈ ہوں پاکستان سے, لیکن جہاں آ کے میں نے کاؤنسلنگ کی جاب شروع کر دی ہے.
اچھا یہ بتائیے کہ تھیلاسیمیا خاص طور پر آپ کے علاقے میں کافی اپنی فیملی ہے جن کو تھیلاسیمیا ہے بچوں کو؟
جی, خاص طور پہ پاکستانی فیملیز جو بریڈ فورڈ میں ہیں اور لیڈز میں ہیں کافی ان میں تھیلاسیمیا پایا جاتا ہے. ٹریٹ کافی ہے لیکن فل بلڈ ڈیزیز جو ہے وہ بھی ایٹ لیسٹ 26-27 لوگ ہوں گے لیڈز میں, اور 45 اور 50 کے قریب ہیں بریڈ فورڈ میں.
کیا پیغام دینا چاہتے ہیں فیملیز کو کہ تھیلاسیمیا سے پریونشن کے لیے وہ کیا کریں؟
میرا وائڈر کمیونٹی کے لیے یہ پیغام ہے کہ وہ کوشش کریں کہ جتنی زیادہ معلومات حاصل کر سکتے ہیں کریں, اور اپنی اسکریننگ کرائیں, بلڈ ٹیسٹ کروائیں, تاکہ پتہ چلے کہ وہ تھیلاسیمیا کے کیریئرز ہیں یا نہیں ہیں. کیونکہ اگر دونوں پیرنٹس کیریئر ہوں گے تو ان کے گھر میں یہ چانسز ہیں 25% ایوری پریگننسی پہ کہ ان کے گھر میں بچہ تھیلاسیمیا میجر کے ساتھ پیدا ہو سکتا ہے. تو اگر انہیں اپنا سٹیٹس پتہ ہوگا تو وہ پھر اس کے بارے میں کاؤنسلر سے ملیں گے, ڈاکٹر سے ملیں گے, اور اس کو پریونشن کے لیے کچھ نہ کچھ معلومات حاصل کریں گے اور ان کو اڈاپٹ کریں گے.
If your child has got thalassemia, just try to attend your appointments and like make yourself aware of the condition. Try to find more information about it. Come to conferences like this, and I know Rabata has like stalls sometimes in Melas. Go there.
What about the pumping action of the heart? Well, the heart enlarges slightly because it's actually got to pump blood around the body, and people with thalassemia are anemic some of the time. So the heart is actually very efficient. It actually pumps a bit more blood than normal.
A Thalassemia UK support group, Beta Thalassemia support group, and various other groups on Facebook. Now, you need to go on your groups for here.